What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and continue learning about things you should never do in the UK. Part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, feel free to check that out or stay right here in part 2. That's perfectly fine as well. But in part 1, we started watching this video where lots of people from the UK were giving their opinion on the number one thing tourists and visitors should never do when visiting the UK. And honestly, it seemed like in part 1, the number one thing that I noticed was people saying, don't jump the queue, which here in the United States would be like, don't cut in line, is what we would say. But it's just, it makes me wonder, how often are Americans or maybe other tourists from around the world jumping the queue? Is that very common for so many people in this video that we started? So many people from the UK to be like, oh, thing you should never do in the UK, don't jump the queue. Do not jump. It's like, it's so funny because that's definitely not the first thing an American would say about the US. It makes me wonder, is it a big problem with people visiting the UK? Or are people in the UK just so cognizant and aware of this that it's like just a huge act of disrespect? Is it just happening all the time and people are annoyed at it? I'm curious because unfortunately, I feel like this would be a very, very likely thing for someone from America to do, honestly, because goodness knows, here in the US, people are cutting in line or jumping the queue all the time. I won't go on a rant, a tirade about this for too long, but people will pretend like they don't know what a line or a queue is. I'll be standing in line trying to form a line. They'll come from the side. They'll act like they don't understand why I'm there, that I'm waiting. Anyway, the other thing in part 1 that I noticed was several people from the UK saying, in the UK, don't be disrespectful. In other words, be respectful. Maybe even apologize if you bump into someone. Maybe even use the S word that us Americans do not like to use. Sorry. Maybe even say sorry. Even if you bump into someone, or if the door shuts and you don't quite get it in time or something, or maybe even hold the door open for someone. Just be polite and respectful in general, which is again kind of sad that when I think about it, that this might actually be a problem for Americans visiting the UK, because man, definitely when it comes to the United States, our tolerance, I've learned this more and more as I've learned about the UK. In America, our tolerance for disrespectful kind of behavior, not saying sorry, not apologizing when you bump into people, or not really caring or being empathetic, that's kind of normal here. It's not seen as a big deal or disrespectful. So, I don't know, it's just a whole difference in culture and mindset, and it honestly seems a lot nicer in the UK in that respect. So, I don't know, I'm just having such a nice time learning about all these don'ts of UK culture, things you should not do in the UK, and kind of how that compares to America and what you can't and can do here, and how we should, basically, how we should behave ourselves in the UK. So I'm interested to see in part 2 here, the end of this video, and what other people from the UK have to say about stuff you shouldn't do in the UK. So let's take a look.
No, the rules kind of change in London, the sort of cultural, unwritten laws of British culture.
Okay.
Well, if you
So is he talking about London in particular, or just British culture?
well, if you think London, Paris, New York, etc., people walk fast, speak fast, have no time to say hello, goodbye, thank you, etc.
Right.
To an extent.
Yeah.
So it's the price of, in quotes, progress, or is the sweet taste, or accurate rather, taste of capitalism.
Oh man, this guy's getting kind of philosophical on us a little bit, but this is kind of interesting just to hear about more of a practical point of view. When it comes down to it, I would expect, if you're living in a big city, no matter where you are in the world, it's like big city living. People are busy on the go, they have something going on, probably like not going to be the most patient, but I would expect if you could do like a study on this, I would wonder if American city livers, American city goers, are they even more rude or disrespectful than like London or UK city goers, even though they're all city goers? Who are the rudest city goers in the world?
Let's say that you've called up a lift and you're waiting for someone, and then the door opens and you both go, even though you've called it. So maybe it's your turn to go in. You kind of clash.
That's exactly a typical one, actually. You call the lift, you're waiting for it, the door opens, and someone's in front of you, and you say, "Sorry."
Oh, this is so funny to go through these. I love it. These hypothetical situations. This would never even be a situation in the United States. Like, if I called an elevator and someone came up next to me and then they got on the elevator before me, even though I called the lift or the elevator, I would not think anything of it. And then if they kind of brushed me or touched me and kept going and didn't say anything, I would think, they're a little rude, they're not very considerate. But would I think that it's abnormal or strange? No. I'd be like, okay, typical American situation, typical American behavior going on here. I'd never, and it's even funnier, he's about to say, oh, even if you're the one who's bumped into or is cut, someone goes in front of you, you might feel like you have to say sorry, which is hilarious and would really never happen in the US.
And really, it's a real place to say sorry.
Right.
And it may be both of you said sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, right. That's usually the kind of general scenario, right? Both of you will probably say sorry.
Absolutely.
So basically they're saying in the UK, Americans in particular, I could see needing to learn this. This would have to be a learned behavior. Americans would need to have it in our mind and be present and ready to be like, oh, excuse me, sorry, didn't mean to bump into you. And also just be a bit more patient in general, letting people actually go in their turn. Americans, especially in the city, can be very, very impatient, like basically no patience. Especially somewhere like New York City or something, waiting to get on the bus. Like, people are not in general ready to be friendly and apologetic. That's for sure. I'm speaking in generalities, of course. You'll find all types of Americans, from the rudest and most inconsiderate to some of the sweetest, most generous, kind people. I think that's a very American trait. How big of a spectrum we have of all types of personalities and behaviors in regards to how polite or rude we are. And depending on where you live in America, too.
But it's not generally you apologising or they're apologising, really.
No. In fact, it comes out of you without you realising that you've said it.
Yeah. So would you say
Wow.
you don't have to use it as a sort of a guilt admission?
No, as I said, ultimately it's a reflex of politeness.
And honestly, that's really nice. Like, I like hearing about this kind of thing and that it exists in British culture. This instinct of being nice. And if you're bumped into, you might say sorry. Maybe you're saying sorry so that the other person knows it's their turn to say sorry. Maybe there's a little passive aggressiveness undertones, but just in general, the fact that people are ready and willing to say sorry or be lighthearted and respectful about it just says a lot about UK culture, just in general, and versus American culture. How that would never happen in the US. You bump into someone and they say sorry? No, never.
Aren't people in Britain so insincere then? They're just constantly walking around saying sorry.
That's a good question. Maybe Brits are a little insincere. Who knows? I think it's just,
That's funny. That's a funny way to look at it. Like, British people know that they don't need to be saying sorry if they're bumped into, if they are wronged. but it's kind of a built-in sort of natural attitude. And I like it. It's very nice. As long as if everyone's just saying, sorry, excuse me, have a good day, that's great. I'd much rather have it overdone in that way than not at all, like it can be here in America a lot of the time.
It's just, I guess, a cultural politeness thing. We sometimes can be overly polite.
Fine.
Someone could bump into me and I would apologize.
I was.
That's fantastic. And it's also definitely something Americans, or probably, I don't exactly know how this compares to other countries around the world. I know how it compares to the United States, and this is a behavior that Americans would have to learn to apologize or say sorry or excuse me, or else I imagine we would really stick out and come across as pretty rude, right? I imagine so.
It's one of those things, isn't it?
Are you a sorry person?
Oh, all the time.
Wow.
Yeah, I run around apologizing for things all the time that probably was not really my fault.
Yeah.
And yeah, I probably wasn't actually sorry, but anyway, it just slips out.
That is so funny. That is funny how lots of the people being interviewed here are aware that maybe they're overly apologetic and saying sorry for things they're not even sorry about. Like someone comes up and spills their coffee all over your jacket or something, and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry that you dumped scalding hot coffee on me. I'm sorry. I know that would never happen, but it's an exaggeration, but it's just kind of funny to think about how that would just not ever happen in the US. But it's nice. It's nice.
Makes you think now that didn't Elton John have that song? Sorry seems to be the hardest word. It's kind of
Maybe not here.
Yeah.
Not at all. It's a bit of a lie from Elton John. 'Cause it's probably the easiest word you can say.
Depends if you're sincere or not, though, doesn't it?
Right.
I often find it a bit strange that you say that if you were to do it on an escalator, people would actually speak up. Do you think that's the case?
No, yeah, definitely.
Because us Brits are known for being a little bit like passive aggressive.
Yeah.
But you'd actually verbally hear someone kind of
definitely.
shout at you or moan.
I wouldn't say shout. I wouldn't say, they go all out and start, having a proper shout up. But without a doubt, they'd say something passive like, oh.
Okay, so this is if you're like waiting for a elevator or a lift or something, and someone jumps around you and goes in before you, even though you were there first or you pressed the button. I was kind of wondering about this. How willing are British people to say something, to confront what people in the UK, if they encounter something they perceive to be rude? What is the response? I figure it's a lot of disapproving glances, possibly some tutting, the thing that I've learned, which is very British, honestly, very passive aggressive. And this guy, and I think someone from part 1, they were saying they would definitely be willing to say something, which is pretty aggressive. That's definitely, that'd be pretty normal behavior in the United States. If an American thinks you have done something rude or wrong, to speak up and say something. It's just funny because then the other person probably wouldn't care. The other American probably wouldn't really care that they did anything rude. I don't know. That's more in big, busy city life and less so in the rural countryside, small town life where people are a little more polite and know each other in small town America.
Stand on the right or something like that. Or just stay in my way then. Something sarcastic along those lines.
Did you enjoy
Yes! I love that. That is great. Oh, yeah. Just stay right in my way. Yep, perfect. Right there. Get in my way. Perfect amount of sarcasm to get your point across. Okay, what is this? Do you enjoy queuing? Do you think it's a good cultural rule? Okay. Man, I swear half of this video has been about queuing. It is such a bigger deal than I ever thought, or am I getting the wrong idea here?
Do you think it's a good cultural rule?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then what is your thought on things like the bar and specifically, I'm always thinking of the London Underground.
The bar. What is the bar? Queuing, is there a bar? What are her thoughts on the bar? I don't know what that means.
The London Underground. Well, yeah, queuing doesn't really come to force in London Underground, does it? Because London people are always in a rush, and therefore don't don't have the politeness
Right.
to decide to queue.
Because
Right.
of that, it's just like a swarm,
Yes,
right?
that's just
Okay, I was gonna say, that makes sense to me. This makes sense. Like, when you're in a big city, you're rushing to get on the underground train or whatever it is. There's only so much cooperation and politeness that can possibly occur. Even in the UK, where people appear to be much more on board with the queuing and the respect, when it's like the madness and mayhem of getting on the tube in the morning, I shouldn't be shocked. I'm not shocked to hear that the queuing kind of goes by the wayside.
a swarm, and it's like get on that train before it goes, even though there'll be one in 2 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and on the sort of, if there was like a list of cultural rules, how high does queuing fit? How high does queuing sit on the English scale?
I imagine extremely high, because that has been most of this video is queuing.
Pretty high up. I mean, it's the first thing that came to mind. So
Wow.
it's right out there for me.
Wow.
Brilliant. Thanks for watching this week's episode.
There you have it. There you have it. That was fantastic. A lot of interesting takeaways from this. This was by Easy English, learning English from the streets. And I got to give that a like. That was great. It's so fun hearing from people in the UK, straight from them, and what their thoughts are on the don'ts of UK culture, things you shouldn't do. And I'm a little shocked, and at the same time not, that queuing came up so much. Because it is just not that big of a deal in the United States. And maybe it's just that we have gotten used to the chaos and clutter of waiting in line. We call it waiting in line. And I'm definitely just, most of the time, don't get me wrong, most of the time you're waiting in line, waiting in the queue, and everything goes perfectly fine, perfectly normal. But I swear, man, if I had to say 1 out of 4 times, 1 out of 5 times, if I'm trying to wait in a queue, there's someone doing something weird, like trying to pretend like I'm not waiting in line and kind of get in front of you, or it really is. Americans can be very creative with how they approach cutting in line. It's kind of crazy, and that's just normal. It's just kind of a normal fact of life, and you hope that a really aggressive, loud American is in line with you. That'll kind of yell at that person, and then you're kind of like, oh yes, thank goodness. Or maybe we should just adopt the tutting, the British tutting. They would just be like, what the heck is he doing? And they'd just be kind of scared and scamper off, hopefully. But other than that, than the queuing, I'd say this video, a lot of the people from the UK focused on the politeness of living in the UK and the general understanding that everyone is respectful and kind and will apologize or say sorry to each other. That is a huge one that I think Americans would be really, really stunned by, because it's just not expected very much here. And I feel like it is expected in the UK, and Americans would be coming across as rude without even really meaning to, because here it's not that rude to not apologize, to not say sorry, which is, it's really interesting to think about that, like how used to it we are here. And there's this whole other place, the UK, where everyone's kind of more nice and respectful, to a certain extent, and that's really cool to think about. So I really enjoyed this video and learning about some of these interesting things that I think Americans would definitely get wrong while visiting the UK. This should probably be mandatory viewing for Americans before visiting. I imagine there's a lot more things Americans do that drive people crazy in the UK, but this was just a couple that stuck out, and I enjoyed this quite a bit. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment, perhaps with your opinion on what you think people should never do when visiting the UK. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to the UK and UK culture and seeing stuff from the UK I've never seen before or learned about, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.